The Lebanese army fights the Islamic State group in a town near the border with Syria. But as Arsal falls out of government control, how serious is the threat to an already volatile Lebanon? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to another edition of Inside Story. I'm Sami Zeidan. Fighting has entered a fifth day in the Lebanese town of Arsal after a brief truce between Syrian opposition fighters and the Lebanese army collapsed. Arsal is in a Sunni majority area and lies on Lebanon's border with Syria. Thousands of Syrian refugees have settled there. It serves as a logistical base for Hezbollah fighters who back the Syrian president Bashar al-Assad. But it's also a base for Syrian opposition groups like al-Nusra Front and the Islamic State. Zaina joins us now from the outskirts of Arsal. Zaina, first of all, is a deal being worked out there?
Well, really, this is the biggest confrontation between the Lebanese army and Syrian rebels. Arsal has long been a flashpoint, and really analysts and observers in Lebanon have been saying for months now and predicting that there would be some sort of conflict. Why? Arsal is a rear base for Syrian rebels. It is also a town which hosts more than 100,000 Syrian refugees. And the Lebanese population, some 40,000 people, they're very sympathetic to the Syrian opposition. Now, Arsal is mainly Sunni. It is an area which is surrounded by mainly Shia villages. And in the Shia villages, people there support the Syrian government. And over recent months, really, we've seen rockets being fired from Syrian territory landing in Shia areas. Shia areas, for example, blaming Arsal for allowing Syrian fighters to use this as a rear base where they have makeshift clinics. So it's really, tensions have been boiling for some time now. But really, this is the biggest incursion yet. Syrian rebels have threatened the Lebanese army in the past. They have attacked the Lebanese army in the past, and they have targeted the Lebanese Shia group Hezbollah in the past. But this is the first time these rebels have actually taken territory and occupying Lebanese land.
Are we seeing a bit of a spillover, though, in other parts of Lebanon, like Tripoli, Zaina?
The events in Arsal is a spillover of the Syrian conflict in Tripoli in the north of the country. We've seen clashes over really the past 2 years between two communities, the Sunnis and the Alawites, Sunnis supporting the Syrian opposition and the Alawites supporting the Syrian government. Lebanon is politically divided, and the crisis in Syria deepened these tensions, and those tensions run along sectarian lines. People are quite worried, and they feel that they're not able to disassociate Lebanon. Now, there are those who oppose Hezbollah and say it's because Hezbollah sent fighters to support the Syrian president that we are seeing these rebels target the Lebanese army and destabilize Lebanon. But there are others, for example, who say that no, if Hezbollah did not join the fight in Syria, then those rebels will be in Lebanon. So deep divisions in this country. The incident in Arsal is very explosive. The head of general security saying he doesn't expect a wider security crisis in the country, but what he's expecting is more bombings, targeted attacks, particularly against the army and against Hezbollah. But right now, the majority of the Lebanese people are rallying behind the Lebanese army. The only really institution for now is being seen as neutral, but there are still some, we can call them extremist voices in Lebanon, who believe that the Lebanese army is working hand in hand with the Syrian government as well as Hezbollah.
All right, that's Zaina there reporting on the outskirts of Arsal. Lebanon and Syria have had tenuous relations since the war in Syria began. In 2011, the government in Lebanon said it would distance itself from that war in Syria. But with thousands of Syrian refugees entering Lebanon, the government couldn't afford to simply stand by. As the situation in Syria worsened and President Bashar al-Assad's rule was being threatened, Hezbollah fighters decided to step in and help him. Soon, Hezbollah turned the war in Assad's favor. Still, fighting has periodically broken out along the Syrian-Lebanese border. Well, there's a lot to discuss, so let's bring our guests into the show. From Beirut, we have Elias Hanna, a former general in the Lebanese military. From London, Fawaz Gerges, chairman of the Contemporary Middle Eastern Studies programme at the London School of Economics and the author of The Rise and Fall of al-Qaeda. Also from Beirut, Kamel Wazne, political analyst and founder of the Center for American Strategic Studies in Beirut, a think tank that covers regional issues. Good to have you with us, gentlemen. If I could start with Elias Hanna first of all. Arsal is a strategically important place, isn't it? It's close to the border with Syria. It's also a lone Sunni populated area in the Hezbollah-dominated Beqa Valley, right?
Yes, when we talk about Arsal, we're talking about location because, you know, in strategy and geopolitics, we say location, location, location. And now it happens that Arsal has like 70 kilometers common border with Syria, where you have, you know, the Kalamun region, many wars between Hezbollah and the rebels. Moreover, this area is considered like the buffer. It's considered like the strategic depth of the capital in Syria, which really should be safe, should be rebels-free. Now, Arsal also is like a Sunni, 30,000 people with more than 100,000 refugees, surrounded by Shia towns, as well as by an area that is really dominated by Hezbollah. What really changed the equation or the rule of engagement lately is this war that between Hezbollah hit and run and the regime against these rebels, and we consider Arsal as a safe haven for like hospital, like eating, like, you know, recovering from war, and you name it. I think it is a turning point now as far for Arsal, for the Lebanese army, as well for Hezbollah and the regime in Syria.
A lot of people seem to agree with you in saying it's a turning point. Before we look forward to the future, perhaps I could ask Fawaz Gerges, how did we get to this point where this town could fall so quickly in the hands of groups like apparently a Nusra Front and the Islamic State group? What was going on perhaps under the surface? There must have been something going on for a while for these groups to be in a position to take the town so quickly, disarm Lebanese army and security force installations or neutralize them.
Absolutely, and this tells you how well coordinated, how well planned it has been in the making for a long while. It was a major attack on the Lebanese security forces, exacted a heavy toll on the Lebanese army and the police, dozens killed and injured, dozens captured. They've taken a major city, a city that has been in the eye of the storm. The Lebanese army and the security forces have known about this for a long time. Even Hezbollah has known about this a long time and warned about it. It tells you that what has happened in the Kalamun region in the last year or so, after the major advances by the Syrian army and Hezbollah against the Syrian rebels, between 3,000 and 5,000 rebels basically escaped to the mountains and the areas, the buffer zones between Lebanon and Syria. And they have been hunted down by both the Syrian army and Hezbollah, and they're carrying out hit-and-run attacks against the Syrian army. Arsal, as my earlier colleague has said, is very, very important for the armed groups. It's a logistical base. It's a strategic base. It's a base where many of the families of the fighters are located. And by attacking Arsal, taking hold of Arsal, basically they have changed the rules of engagement. They have taken war to the heart of the Hezbollah area. And in fact, I would argue that all this talks about the Nusra Front and the Islamic State pulling out of Arsal is wishful thinking. Because to pull out of Arsal into Syria, back to Syria, this would be suicidal. Because they would be hunted down by both Hezbollah and Syria. This is a long, prolonged, difficult battle. It would take not only days, but weeks. It has major implications, not only for the Syrian conflict, but also for the security situation in Lebanon, at least in the midterm.
Kamel Wazne, how do you think Hezbollah will be reading events in Arsal? Will they be reading it in that way, that this is an attempt by some of the groups opposed to the Syrian regime, their attempt to take the fight to Hezbollah in its strongholds? Or was this simply, as seems to be reported by some of the media quoting sources in the group Islamic State, that they're on the defensive, that they were perhaps provoked, as they would see it, into action, into a military confrontation in Arsal after the arrest of a commander that they find favor with?
Well, obviously, Hezbollah been in a fighting with this group for a very long time. You have to remember that a lot of the car bombing that exploded in the suburb of Beirut and throughout the Shiite area came directly from Arsal. And recently, some of these people were killed in Arsal, where the manufacturer of these car bombs. I think Hezbollah is looking very carefully. He knows it's very critical for the Lebanese army to finish this operation. And I think Hezbollah will be ready to support the Lebanese forces if it's needed, as most of the Lebanese think as this operation is a war against extremists and against terrorists. We just heard Mr. Saad al-Hariri, the ex-prime minister, just came with a conference, put in 1 billion from Saudi donation, taking a strong position. If Saad al-Hariri is taking a strong position, what would you think Hezbollah will do at this point? Especially, this is the background of Hezbollah, the area that he thinks this is the main area that he has to protect, and it's very strategically, as everybody said, for Hezbollah and for Syria to eliminate these extremists from that area. I think the battle will be tough and strong, but this Arsal been a resort for these extremist terrorist organization for a very long time, and I think this time it's time to close that resort, and I think it will happen with some losses and casualty.
The term extremists and terrorists, of course, is a term which all groups seem to exchange with each other, especially in that region. Let's bring in Elias Hanna once again. Why did the Lebanese security forces arrest Ahmad Juma, one of the commanders in Arsal that it appears triggered this latest confrontation?
I don't think that Jum'a is, the trigger for all of this. However, the army has a list to arrest people that Jum'a that participated and, like a terrorist organization. Moreover, I would like to comment on something that was said, that Hezbollah is a win-win situation today. Hezbollah cannot really participate in this war because, in Lebanon, it is considered as, between the Lebanese army hitting the Sunni and Hezbollah can really secure a larger area within the backing of the back area of the Lebanese army, like in Kalamoun. And he is in a win-win situation because, if you contain these people inside, and when you talk about these people, we have different kind of, the IS, allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, and you have the Nusra allegiance to Ayman al-Zawahiri. So you have different ideological approach, though they are all of them jihadists and terrorists. Now, if they are contained within Arsal, Hezbollah wins. And if they are destroyed within Arsal, Hezbollah wins. And for this jihadist group, it is like lose-lose situation. If they stay inside, they will be destroyed. And if they go, they will be like killed by Hezbollah or by the Syrian regime. However, we can see like something in the air that they can do, like, a negotiated withdrawal, as what happened in Homs like 6-7 months ago. You know what I mean? So now, arresting al-Jum'a, a terrorist, you cannot ask the army why they're arresting Jum'a. However, is Jum'a with al-Nusra or with IS? Al-Nusra said, no, it's not one of ours, you know what I mean? So maybe internally they have something, a different faction, and they are infighting internally within Arsal. Why Arsal fell? It's like a safe haven, and these people accepted these people, but not all of Arsal people are pro with these people. Arsal people, most of them are in the army.
Right.
Moreover, you know what I mean? So it's something a little bit difficult and complicated.
It is difficult and complicated, not only in terms of the alliances that are forming within Arsal, but regionally as well. We've got Saudi Arabia, which supports the fight against the Syrian regime, now financing the Lebanese army to fight some of the groups which are fighting the Syrian regime. Fawaz Gerges, do you see any sort of policy difficulty there?
There are no contradictions in the current Saudi position. In the past year, Saudi Arabia has become very much proactive against Jabhat al-Nusra and the Islamic State. Saudi leaders now fully recognize the critical threat that the Islamic State and the jihadist groups represent not only the social fabric of the Arab world, but even to regional security and peace. As you well know, Sami, Saudi Arabia has classified many elements as terrorist and has taken an active role. More than a year ago, Western government had warned the Saudi government of any kind of ambiguity. There is no more any ambiguity, even in particular that the Islamic State, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi's outlet or shop now has expanded to the Saudi-Iraqi borders. And Saudi leaders are very much concerned about the ability of the Islamic State to recruit inside Saudi Arabia itself. Now you have not only regional consensus on how to basically face this particular threat, but even the Americans and the Europeans are on the same page. The question is, as you know, the Islamic State has expanded. It controls now 30% of the Syrian territories, 35% of the Iraqi territories. They are on the Jordanian-Iraqi border, the Saudi-Iraqi borders, and now some of them are in Lebanon. This is a real threat. But final point on this point, Sami. The threat that the Islamic State represent is not in terms of numbers. We know that the numbers of the Islamic State represent between 10 and 15,000. They have been able to find a shelter, a refuge, a hadina sha'biyya, a social base among a critical segment of Sunni public opinion. They have portrayed itself as a spearhead in the fight against the so-called the Alawites and the Shiite. And this is where the threat lies. You need to deactivate the sectarian tensions. You need to pull the rug from underneath their feet. And security solutions on their own will not be able to resolve this particular question. You need to really address the political and the sociological causes of this sectarian strife that's threatening the very security and the nation state in the Al-Mashriq, in particular in the Levant.
Well, as you're highlighting really there, Mr. Gerges, the situation in Lebanon is being felt in Saudi Arabia is the bottom line. The kingdom is giving Lebanon's military $1 billion to help fight the Islamic State group along the Syrian border. That's in addition, of course, to $3 billion in military aid the kingdom pledged to the Lebanese government late last year. Kamel Wazne, how much of a threat... Well, actually, let me start with this question. How much of a real alliance is there here? Because you could say in one sense, you could say Hezbollah, the Syrian regime, and indirectly Saudi Arabia in Arsal are all on the same side in this battle, aren't they?
Well, this is really the surprise of this confrontation, how strong Saudi Arabia came and how strong Saad al-Hariri actually making, just like a few hours from now, a press conference making today a statement about how they can allocate that $1 billion to support the Lebanese army. The Lebanese army need of a lot of help in terms of military and assistance.
But is this anything more than a temporary alliance to finish a common enemy in one spot?
Well, I think at this point, the Saudi felt the pinch for a very long time. They supported al-Nusra, they supported some of these extremists in the fight against Syria. And of course, they don't have like for Hezbollah in Lebanon or any place. But the fact that today al-Nusra and Islamic State, or the Islamic State in the border of Saudi Arabia and on the border of Jordan, start to represent an imminent threat against Saudi Arabia, I think this is the turning point where the Saudi Arabia felt they have to fight back and they have to actually assess their enemy in terms of danger. And they think now maybe the Islamic State is a dangerous, the highest level of danger to the Saudis, and for that I think they gave their men in Lebanon to go ahead and make the statement, because we heard a lot of these future members of the parliament who were against the army. They came very strong, and we see the confrontation between the supporter of these future members against the Lebanese army in Tripoli. I think today we can say maybe there's a merge of convenience between Hezbollah and the Saudi on fighting, and the Syrian in fighting and confronting the Islamic State in Lebanon, and hopefully this will expand to throughout the region, because they're really a threat, and they are considered by everybody as a terrorist organization,
let me jump in
including the
here.
United States and
let me jump in
Lebanon.
here and let me bring in Elias Hanna. Do you see that there is any long-term strategic realliance going on in the policies of countries and how they approach the Syrian conflict?
I think that Saudi Arabia is really within, I mean, since 1 year, Saudi Arabia is remaking its image, because it was, you know, labeled as really supporting terrorist organization. When they have changed internally, the decision makers internally, they went into, like, you know, list of terrorist organization, the Muslim Brotherhood, al-Nusra, and the ISIS. Now they are in different approach. Why should be labeled like terrorist, you know, like backing terrorism? Now Saudi Arabia is in a dilemma, I guess, because, I mean, this Jabhat al-Nusra and, you know, IS are really helping them indirectly to limit the power or power projection of Iran, as well as for the Syrian regime. But on the other hand, they are a major threat ideologically, as well as, and you name it, against Saudi Arabia. So this balance between Saudi Arabia is a wise approach.
What about the threat,
However,
Elias, Mr. Hanna, what about the threat to the Lebanese state? You said earlier you felt that these fighters, the IS and Nusra Front, are in a lose-lose situation. If they stay in Arsal, they're going to be bombed to smithereens, perhaps, and if they go to Syria, they're going to be eliminated by Assad's forces. Aren't we assuming here that that's the only two options available to them? What's to prevent them popping up in another part of Lebanon that perhaps we're not even thinking about, and surprise the world as they did in Arsal?
I don't think they will pop up. We will witness some minor problems, not existential for the Lebanese state, neither for the army nor for Hezbollah. I mean, when you talk about the IS in Iraq, it's like contiguous country between Iraq and Syria. I mean, in Syria, when you talk about Arsal, it's small, tiny little place, surrounded. It is not really contiguous and surrounded from all places. You know what I mean? It's not an existential threat. However, if you follow the Sunni stance, the Sunni reaction, especially former Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri, what he's saying, you know, it's like really, backing the army. They don't have a safe haven in Lebanon. Moreover, the last press conference or the speech of King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, it's like falls within backing the Lebanese army and the Lebanese state.
All right, we've got just a couple of minutes, so let me bring Fawaz Gerges into the discussion again. We've seen Nusra Front and the Islamic State group fighting each other inside Syria, and now apparently they're allies. Is this a temporary alliance, or has there been something of a realignment of policy objectives amongst some of the anti-Bashar al-Assad groups?
I think there is all-out war between Jabhat al-Nusra and Daesh, or the Islamic State inside Syria. They have decimated al-Nusra Front in al-Ruqqa and Deir ez-Zor, in the countryside of Aleppo. But the reason why there is a kind of a joining of ranks between al-Nusra and the Islamic State in Arsal, for the simple reason, Sami. They are being hunted down by the Syrian army and Hezbollah in the Qalamun. It's an existential threat. Basically, they either unite or die. They came to Arsal to defend their very existence.
So is this the last stand for these groups, do you think?
Absolutely. Even though we are already, according to some of the mediators in Arsal, some of the Lebanese, there are major differences between the position of Jabhat al-Nusra and the position of the Islamic State. They're disagreeing over tactics and strategy. Final point about what the militants want in Arsal. I think you're going to see basically talks about a way out. They want a way out, not just to go to Syria. You're going to see probably a kind of a demands to pull them out of Arsal into areas where Syrian opposition exists, either in Aleppo or some areas in al-Ruqqa. This is the position, because the armed man in Arsal cannot afford to go back to Syria basically from Arsal. This would be collective suicide. So the talks will drag on for a long time. This is a long battle. It's a very costly battle, but I think the Lebanese people are rallying around the army. If there is a political consensus, the Lebanese army and the Lebanese state will be able to weather this particular storm. I hope that both Hezbollah and its opponents in Lebanon can really use this particular point in order to reconcile and begin the process of reconciliation.
Let's end on the point of reconciliation and thank our guests, Elias Hanna, Kamel Wazne and Fawaz Gerges. And of course, thank you for watching. You can leave your comments on facebook.com/AJ Inside Story or go to @AJ Inside Story on Twitter. I'm Sami Zeidan. Thanks for watching.